Have you ever dreamed of seeing your Chrome extension used by people all over the world? What if I told you making your Chrome extension global is not as hard as it seems? There is one key factor that limits the global reach of Chrome extensions, and that is language. A significant percentage of Chrome extension users search for and use Chrome extensions in languages other than English. There's just so much missed opportunity for growth by not supporting multiple locales. So in this video, I'm going to be revealing exactly how I took my Chrome extension global and how you can do the same. I'll also be sharing a custom script I developed to automate this process using AI. The very first thing you want to figure out when making your Chrome extension global is how many languages you want to support. The Chrome Web Store supports up to 52 languages. So in your case, you could decide to support all languages, but in my case, I decided to support specific languages that have maybe the most users and would give me a better ROI for my efforts, basically. For selecting which languages to support, I recruited the help of ChatGPT. So basically, I asked it to give me the top 10 locales to support for Chrome extensions and the reason why. So with this, I can make an informed decision on which locales I decide to support, because supporting like a ton of locales is a lot of effort. English, obviously, it says Spanish because of there's a large user base across continents. Chinese, says French, German, Japanese, Korean. So based off this response, I'm able to have an idea of which languages I would actually support in my Chrome extension. So let's look at the code. If you watched my previous video before, you've probably seen this project called Quick Quotes, which is supposed to be a Chrome extension to allow you view public quoted tweets on Twitter web. So in order to globalize or localize your extension, the first thing you need to do is you're required to set up a locales folder, just like I have here, an underscore locales folder. Once you've done that, you're also required to specify the languages or the locales that you support. In this case, as you can see, I support about 9 locales. This is German, English, Spanish, French, Japanese, Korean, Portuguese, then Russian. So basically each language that you support would have its own folder. Then under each folder, you'd have the messages.json file. This is where the language key would live, or basically each word. The messages.json file is basically a JSON file representing the key to the actual language translation. So in this case, this is the extension name, this is the extension description. These are some other messages that are used in the app and the actual message. Basically, it comes in the format of the message key and the actual message. There are also some other bits to it, but I'll get back to that in a second. So once you've created an underscore locales file, you'll be required to also specify what the default locale should be. So in my case, the default locale is English. So just like I explained already, you can see an example on the Chrome for Developers documentation where you have the underscore locales file on your extension directory, and each locale that you support would have a folder with a messages.json file. So at a very simple level, what we have in our messages.json file is the key for the message, then the actual message itself, and optionally a description. In the manifest file, when we want to reference a message, we basically would use this symbol, which is underscore underscore message underscore whatever the message name is, in this case the key, so let's say extension name, and underscore underscore. Let me show you how I use that in my manifest. If you remember, in my locale I have 2 keys called ext name and ext description. So with underscore underscore message underscore extension name underscore, I'm basically pulling whatever value based on the locale. I'm pulling the message basically of this key, of this message key. So basically based on the user's locale, this value will be different. The value for the description and the value for the name will be different. In the extension code, you can get your language value or the actual message by using the Chrome internalization API. So I'll show you an example in my code. So this extension did not have a lot of places where I used strings or messages that I needed to translate to different locales, but I used a couple of strings and messages in the pop-up where I basically asked for reviews if the users loved using the tool. So as you can see, I pulled out the message based off this key, which is if you love this tool. If you go back to our locale, that's basically this. So if you love this using this tool, please leave a review. Built with this is the love emoji, I believe. Using the Chrome internalization API, I was able to retrieve the value for each of these keys, then basically set the inner HTML value based off the value returned from this get message function. So the key there is to replace all this text with the user's current locale. So for most parts, that's all you need to get started. But there could be more complex use cases. For instance, you can basically create placeholders in your message. This is an example. Using this is the error key and this is the message. So let's say you would like to have the message or the content basically of the message passed in as a parameter, just as we have here. This is basically the approach you would use. You would have to specify the placeholders in your messages.json file basically. In my scenario, I did not have to implement this. I'm going to add this documentation in the description if you have a more complex use case and you want to find out if it's supported. But for a lot of really complex use cases, I think everything you need is supported by the Chrome internalization API. The hardest part about doing all this is basically how do you translate for multiple languages? You could have 10, 20, 30, and that could be a lot of headache and a lot of effort. I wrote a custom AI script to automate this to an extent for myself. I'll show you what that looks like. So this is the script we have here using OpenAI GPT-4 for the translation. So I'm just going to close this up so I can see this properly. So what I have is, for instance, just as an example, I have just extension name and extension description as the two keys, the two message keys I want to translate to other languages. And in my case, I've specified the languages I want to support, which is Spanish, German, French, Japanese, Korean, this is Portuguese, and this is Russian, basically. I'm going to be adding the repository that houses this script in the description. So you could expand the target languages array to fit your use case. So the major bit is you need to have a source locale path, and the source locale path should basically contain your English, in my case anyways, the English translations or the English messages.json file. Based off this, other locale files will be generated. So let's look at what translate locale looks like. So we get the JSON from the source locale path and we iterate over all the target languages, and for each of the target languages we basically iterate over the messages in the source. So in this case, extension name, extension description. Then for each of those keys we want to basically create a translated key in a different locale, and that's what happens here. So we translate the text. So let's see what translate text has. So translate text is basically the AI call to GPT-4 API, OpenAI's API. And as you can see, the system role here is just talking about Chrome extension translator. It starts with translating the Chrome extension to other provided locales. And what really does the magic here is answer a simple text, translate the following English text to this locale. And we set basically the messages. Model is GPT-4, like I mentioned, and temperature is 0 intentionally for a more deterministic answer, basically. Less creativity from GPT so that we have more deterministic translation. Then we return the translated text. Once that is done, we create the target locale path if it does not exist. We override if it exists, and we basically store the new messages.json file inside this folder. And that's pretty much it. So obviously you could make a ton of optimization to this code. As you can see, currently it does not support placeholders. So you could rewrite this to maybe support placeholders. Also, if you have a lot of message keys, you might want to rewrite this to basically make it faster. So I'm going to test run this just to show you what its outputs. So I'm just going to run this. So basically it's translating each key in the English folder to all these other locales. So what happens is the locale folder now has German, Spanish, French, Japanese, Korean, Portuguese, and Russian. And each of these folders have the messages.json file JSON with the same keys basically. So all you would just have to do is to copy the locales folder into your extension root folder. Of course, you might want to also just confirm randomly if the translations were accurate. So let's say I copied this. We're expecting this to be extension description. So I go to Google Translate. As you can see, this is word for word what it is. So for most parts, and in my test and experiment, GPT-4 does a really good job at translating English to those other locales. But of course, you could use a different API, maybe the Google Translate API for instance, or whatever API you get your hands on. And obviously, you could decide to do this manually if you have a lot of money to spend and maybe hire somebody off Fiverr or something. So once you've copied everything to your extensions root folder, so users that have their browser locale set for German, for instance, will see my extension in German, English, same thing, Spanish, and so on and so forth. So you could actually test your localization implementation by changing the default locale of your browser. Yeah, so once you've done all this, you've done most of the work. There's still one more crucial aspect you need to take care of, which is the Chrome Web Store listing description. So I'm in the developer dashboard, which is where you basically upload your extension when you're done. So once you've done that, it will basically show you all the languages, all the current languages that you have your extension in. In this case, we have all these languages, then default is English. But like I mentioned, you want to have your description also in other languages. For instance, I just have this in English, but we have French and the rest. So what I did in my case was basically, carry the English version and ask ChatGPT to translate it. So this bit I did manually. I could possibly also automate similarly, but it's pretty straightforward, so I did not need to create a script for this part. But I will show you the simple prompt I used. So the prompt I used can be found in this markdown file. I mean, to be honest, you do not need this, but just if you want my exact prompt, for instance. So I just have something like help convert the Chrome Web Store description of my Chrome extension to blah blah blah. So to whatever language you want to convert to. So I just copy the English version and paste below my prompt. So basically telling GPT to translate to Spanish. So obviously you change it to whatever language you are trying to translate to. And of course, if you want to be maybe sure about the translation, you can use Google Translate. Maintain the look and feel of the platform. So this, in my opinion, does the job perfectly. And there you have it. Making your Chrome extension globally accessible is more than just reaching more users. It's about connecting with your users in their own language. Today, I've shown you not only the importance of localization, also how to simplify and automate the process using a custom AI script. So if you like this video, make sure to give a thumbs up, drop a comment. It helps motivate me to make more content like this. Thanks for watching and see you later.